Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that the Dupree family spirals into chaos as soon as the silence around Chelsea turns into dread. At first, Anita tries to reassure herself that her daughter may have just misplaced her phone or forgotten to call back, but the hours stretch into a suffocating void. Anxiety drips into every corner of the house like an invisible fog. The Duprees have always known Chelsea as someone fiercely independent but never careless with communication. For her to go completely quiet feels wrong, terrifyingly wrong. Then the message arrives. Anita stares at her phone, hands trembling as though the glass is about to shatter. It is Chelsea's number, yet the words that appear are not Chelsea's voice. The sentences are sharp, predatory, dripping with mockery and malice. They taunt Anita with the revelation that Chelsea is alive, but in the clutches of someone who intends to use her as more than just leverage. Anita cannot breathe for a full 10 seconds as her mind whirls. Relief clashes violently with terror. Her daughter is not dead. But what does survival mean in the hands of such a monster? The Dupree living room becomes a war zone of speculation. Some family members whisper the unthinkable. Could Allison be behind this? That thought had been murmured many times before whenever Chelsea mentioned her former friend turned obsessive shadow. Allison had never hidden her unhealthy fixation. She had threatened Chelsea before, cornered her in public places, whispered promises that sounded more like curses. The memory of Allison's piercing gaze, the way she seemed to catalogue Chelsea's every move, comes rushing back to Anita as though Allison is standing in the room with them now. It makes too much sense. Allison had always wanted control, dominance cloaked as friendship, and when Chelsea resisted, she became a target. While Anita clings to her phone, rereading the vile message, Chelsea herself is waking into a nightmare. Her consciousness swims through a haze, her head heavy as though filled with sand. When her eyes finally open, the sight before her is alien. Bare walls, cracked paint, a single flickering bulb that hums in the silence like a dying insect. She tries to sit up but is yanked back by cold steel biting into her wrist. Her right arm has been shackled to the frame of a bed that looks as though it belongs in an abandoned hospital. The metal creaks when she pulls, but the shackle holds her like a predator's jaw. Panic flares hot in her chest. Her breathing grows ragged as she realizes she has no freedom. Across the room sits a table, and on it, her phone glimmers faintly, screen cracked but still alive. Hope surges. If she can reach it, she can call for help. But her body is sluggish, drained of strength. With her left hand trembling, she tries to stretch across the bed, inch by inch. Her fingertips graze the edge of the wooden table. Every muscle screams with effort. She wills herself closer, nearly tasting salvation when suddenly a hand larger than hers, veined and cruel, seizes the phone first. Chelsea gasps, her throat choking on air as she jerks back. The figure before her is faceless, hidden behind a black mask that gleams in the low light. The intruder's presence swallows the room, filling it with a silence louder than screams. He tilts his head as though mocking her effort, then slides the phone casually into his pocket. Chelsea's body stiffens, and the cry that bursts from her chest is raw, desperate. She screams until her throat burns, but the walls eat her voice, and the mask does not flinch. The kidnapper moves with calm menace, setting the rules immediately. He tells her that any attempt to escape will come with consequences that she cannot imagine. His words drip like venom, lingering long after they are spoken. Chelsea trembles, clutching the iron chain on her wrist as if holding it could anchor her sanity. Her defiance sparks for a moment, though, when she spits out that her parents will never stop hunting him, that her family will destroy anyone who dares harm her. It is her last fragile shield, a desperate reminder of the power outside these walls. The response is merciless. The kidnapper leans in close, the cold kiss of steel pressing against the fragile skin of her throat. The blade gleams just enough for Chelsea to see her own reflection in it. Tinny, broken, terrified. He does not shout, does not raise his voice, but the calmness is worse than rage. He whispers that he fears nothing, not even her parents' wrath, and dares her to test him. Chelsea freezes, her pulse slamming against the knife's edge. Her words die in her mouth, replaced by the cold reality that she is utterly at his mercy. Then he does something crueler still. He takes her phone and, right in front of her, crafts messages to her family. His thumbs move across the screen with ease, as though he has rehearsed this moment. Chelsea watches in horror as her identity is stolen, her voice hijacked. Each message is a blade that slices deeper into her hope, because now her family will be manipulated, tricked into playing his twisted game. Back at the Dupree household, Anita reads those texts again and again, trying to decode them. Something about them feels wrong. The words are hers, but not hers. The rhythm is off, colder, crueler, as though Chelsea had been hollowed out. Anita feels the undertone of threat pulsing through the lines. She tries to imagine the hands that typed them and shudders. Speculation about Allison grows louder. Memories of Allison's obsession with Chelsea now feel like puzzle pieces snapping together. Allison had always wanted control, to cage Chelsea under the guise of love, and when Chelsea resisted, Allison's fixation became toxic. Some family members are convinced this is the answer, yet doubts remain. Allison was dangerous, yes, but the precision of this kidnapping feels almost surgical, too methodical to belong only to a desperate ex-friend. Meanwhile, Chelsea's mind is unraveling in the locked room. Hours pass with no sense of time. The single bulb flickers on and off, plunging her into intervals of darkness where she cannot see the mask but feels it watching. Sometimes she hears footsteps retreating, the creak of a door, then silence. Sometimes she hears nothing at all but her own breathing. Every second is an assault, designed to weaken her spirit. She fights to stay sharp. She recalls survival strategies she once read about, tries to regulate her breathing, to conserve strength. But the fear gnaws at her relentlessly. Every sound becomes a threat. Every shadow becomes alive. Her throat is raw from earlier screams, and now silence feels like both safety and death. The family outside is thrust into a parallel torment. They debate involving the police immediately, but the fear of triggering the kidnapper's wrath keeps them paralyzed. Anita replays the texts, looking for hidden meaning, clues embedded within. What does he want? Money, revenge, or something more grotesque? Control, domination, the satisfaction of watching a family tear itself apart? The uncertainty corrodes them. The narrative of Allison re-enters, heavier this time. Chelsea's past encounters with Allison resurface in Anita's mind, the chilling phone calls in the middle of the night, the way Allison would stand outside Chelsea's school pretending to wait for someone else, the time she left notes that swung between love letters and death threats. It paints a portrait of someone who could absolutely orchestrate this. The Duprees cannot shake the image of Allison finally acting on her promises. But what gnaws at Chelsea most is not just the threat of physical harm, but the psychological warfare. The kidnapper does this not strike her, not yet, but instead suffocates her with unpredictability. He watches her eat, forces her to answer meaningless questions, laughs when she trembles. It is a game of control. And each time Chelsea feels a flicker of courage, he extinguishes it with a word, a gesture, or the glint of his blade. She clings to the thought of her family. That thought is both her anchor and her torment. She imagines Anita holding her phone, crying, desperately reading her messages. She imagines her father pacing the floor, fists clenched, ready to tear down walls. But she also fears what might happen if the kidnapper decides to escalate, to make his threats real. The Duprees begin to argue over the kidnapper's motives. One theory is that he wants ransom, but the messages contain no requests for money. Another believes he is testing them, seeing how far their desperation will drive them. A darker voice whispers that he simply wants to destroy them by using Chelsea as the instrument. Anita's heart aches as she considers each possibility. The weight of deciding what to do presses down on her until she can barely stand. Chelsea, chained and exhausted, begins to drift between fragments of sleep and jolts of terror. Dreams and reality blur. In her dreams she is free, running, calling out for her mother. In reality, she wakes to the sound of the mask breathing in the corner, silently observing her. The dread of not knowing when the next move will come is worse than pain itself. The first phase of the kidnapper's plan has only just begun. He has shown Chelsea that resistance will be punished, shown her family that their lives are now bound to his design. And as the hours stretch into days, The true depth of his intention begins to darken the horizon. The Dupree household transforms into a pressure cooker of fear and suspicion. Anita finds herself unable to sleep, the glow of her phone screen a constant reminder of Chelsea's absence. Each new message carries not only menace but also a sense of strategy, as if the kidnapper is weaving a psychological trap. He doesn't ask for money, doesn't lay out clear demands. Instead, he keeps Anita guessing, forcing her to confront choices without knowing the rules of the game. That uncertainty is unbearable. Anita replays the texts repeatedly, listening to the rhythm in her head. They are too polished to be random. Every line feels deliberate, calculated to unravel her sanity. She begins to write them down in a notebook, searching for patterns. There are words that don't sound like Chelsea at all, words Chelsea would never use. Sharp, clipped commands, as though someone is rehearsing authority. But threaded through them are fragments that almost sound like Chelsea's tone. Or is it all the kidnapper's mimicry? The family's suspicions harden toward Allison. She was once close to Chelsea, but closeness had curdled into obsession. Allison had cornered Chelsea on several occasions, speaking of belonging and possession in ways that made Anita's skin crawl. She had threatened that if Chelsea ever left her, she would regret it. Those words echo now like a curse fulfilled. The Duprees start piecing together every encounter, every warning sign they once brushed aside. And as those memories sharpen, the likelihood that Allison has orchestrated this grows almost undeniable. But inside the locked room, Chelsea begins to feel the difference between paranoia and reality. She recognizes the games her captor plays: the constant observation, the removal of control, the stripping away of her identity. He sits in the shadows for hours, saying nothing, until Chelsea feels the silence pressing on her like a physical weight. When he does speak, it is often in riddles, questions that make no sense. He asks her what freedom means. He asks her what she would sacrifice to see daylight again. These are not the questions of someone who simply wants ransom. They are the questions of someone who feeds on dominance. Chelsea's resistance has become her most fragile weapon. She answers when she must, stays silent when she can, measuring every breath. But fear is constant, especially when the blade reappears, pressing against her throat in silent reminders that her life can be ended at any second. She knows the captor enjoys watching her fear, savoring the way her body stiffens under his control. Then one night, the silence is broken by something different, a sound Chelsea knows too well. A laugh, high-pitched, familiar. For a brief second, her mind flashes to memories of Allison, the way she used to laugh when they were younger. It is enough to twist Chelsea's stomach. Could it really be Allison behind the mask? The thought sends her spiraling into a new wave of terror, because Allison was not a stranger. She was once trusted, once let into Chelsea's world. That betrayal cuts deeper than any blade could. Meanwhile, Anita receives another message. This one is longer, sprawling, like a manifesto. It outlines nothing concrete but paints in disturbing language the captor's control over Chelsea. It boasts of how Chelsea belongs to him now, how every cry, every breath is dictated by his will. The language mirrors phrases Anita remembers Allison using in the past. It makes Anita's blood run cold. But what chills her more is the ultimatum hidden within: Chelsea will remain alive only if Anita follows precise instructions to the letter. They are vague commands, almost ritualistic: stay awake for 3 nights, don't leave the house, don't tell anyone outside the family. If she fails, Chelsea suffers. Anita is forced into an impossible position, trapped between obedience and desperation. She knows she should call the police, knows time is running out, but the messages are so specific in their threats that disobedience feels like a death sentence. The Duprees begin to fracture under the weight of these demands. Arguments erupt, some family members insisting they involve the authorities, others fearing that doing so will guarantee Chelsea's death. Anita becomes the unwilling leader, carrying the burden of every choice, her face pale from exhaustion. She wonders if that is part of the plan, to break them before they even know what the kidnapper truly wants. Back in the locked room, Chelsea begins noticing small details. A faint smell of perfume on the kidnapper's clothing, sometimes the trace of nail polish visible under the glove. These hints claw at her mind, pushing her closer to the conclusion she dreads most. Allison is indeed behind the mask. The idea that someone who once claimed to love her is now orchestrating her torment is a psychological wound deeper than chains or blades. Chelsea tests her captor's resolve by mentioning Allison's name aloud, watching carefully for a reaction. The masked figure freezes for a moment, the silence louder than any scream. Then, with sudden violence, he grips her face, forcing her to meet the black void of the mask. He doesn't confirm or deny, but the reaction is enough to send chills coursing down her spine. The psychological game intensifies. Chelsea is forced to confront not only her fear of dying but the possibility that she was chosen deliberately, not randomly. She replays past moments with Allison threats, the obsession, the way Allison once said, "I'll never let you go." Now those words echo in the darkness of this room, transformed from clingy declarations into sentences of imprisonment. The Dupree family struggles with growing despair. Anita becomes convinced that every move she makes is being watched, that every conversation is somehow monitored. She keeps her phone close, waiting for the next message, the next clue. She knows her daughter is still alive, but survival feels increasingly conditional, hanging by threads the kidnapper alone controls. A breaking point comes when Anita receives a video. It is Chelsea, shackled, her face pale, eyes red from crying. She doesn't speak, her mouth is gagged but her body trembles as the camera zooms close. Then the captor's voice fills the audio, distorted and unrecognizable. He promises that Chelsea will live if Anita proves her loyalty by obeying every command without hesitation. The cruelty is unbearable. Anita feels both rage and helplessness tear through her. Chelsea, too, feels her strength fading. The days blur together. She survives on scraps of food, on water brought at irregular intervals. Her body weakens, but her spirit flickers, refusing to die completely. She clings to one thought: her family will never stop searching. But she also knows time is running out. The longer she remains here, the more she fears the captor will tire of his game and end it with violence. The climax looms closer when the kidnapper escalates his threats. He makes Anita choose: confess a long-buried family secret to the world or risk Chelsea's life. Anita hesitates, torn apart by the possibility that he somehow knows the truth. The Duprees realize that the kidnapping is not random but targeted, connected to something deeper within their family history. That revelation sends shivers through every one of them. Chelsea senses the shift too. The captor begins speaking in ways that suggest knowledge of her family beyond anything Allison could know. He hints at betrayals, at things Chelsea herself never understood. It suggests that the mask may conceal more than one identity, that perhaps Allison is part of something larger, or that another figure is pulling the strings entirely. In her darkest moment, Chelsea's defiance sparks again. She begins to test the chain, mapping the room carefully, looking for any weakness. Each night she pushes herself further, despite exhaustion. Despite the risk of punishment. She knows she cannot rely solely on rescue. If there is even a small chance of escape, she must take it. The Duprees, meanwhile, wrestle with the truth. Anita suspects Allison but also feels the presence of another hand in this nightmare. The messages are too carefully crafted, the demands too intricate. She begins to fear that the family is caught in a web larger than they ever imagined, and Chelsea is simply the bait. The final hours grow unbearably tense. Chelsea is forced to confront the reality of her situation. Survival will not come without sacrifice. The blade returns once more, pressing to her throat, but this time her eyes do not flinch. Her spirit, battered yet unbroken, steels itself. And in that moment of defiance, she realizes the game has reached its breaking point. The Duprees stand on the edge of discovery. The kidnapper's mask about to slip, secrets on the verge of exposure. What happens next will decide not only Chelsea's fate but the future of the entire family. The Duprees reach a point where silence is no longer an option. Anita, exhausted to the marrow of her bones, decides that the family cannot remain paralyzed by fear. Every message has felt like a leash around her throat, but she realizes that obedience has bought them nothing except more torment. If Chelsea is to survive, action must be taken. With trembling hands, Anita dials the number she has been avoiding, law enforcement. It is the most dangerous decision she has ever made, but it is also the only one left. The investigators who arrive confirm what Anita already suspected: texts, the video, even the distorted voice are part of a deliberate system of manipulation. They warn her that whoever orchestrated this has studied the Duprees carefully, knows how to exploit their weaknesses. That knowledge chills Anita. The only way such intimate detail could exist is if the kidnapper had once been close. Inside the locked room, Chelsea senses a change too. The captor is more agitated, pacing more often, speaking less. His control is fraying. Chelsea studies his movements with renewed focus, searching for patterns, for any chance to break free. Every scrape of his boot against the floor, every shift of the knife in his hand is memorized. She knows she is running out of time. Either the authorities will reach her first, or she must find her own way out. Then comes the night that fractures everything. The mask slips, not physically but metaphorically, when the captor loses control of his conveneer. Chelsea provokes him deliberately, mentioning Allison's name, describing how her family already suspects her. The reaction is volcanic. His voice cracks, fury trembling beneath it. For a second, Chelsea hears something unfiltered, a voice she recognizes. Not Allison's, but a man connected to her past, someone who had lingered in the family's orbit, feeding Allison's obsession, twisting it into something darker. The realization horrifies her. Allison was a piece of the puzzle, but not the mastermind. The true puppeteer had been lurking all along, a parasite drawn to the Duprees' vulnerabilities. When the police trace the phone signals, Anita braces for the confrontation of her life. The address is a derelict building on the edge of town, windows shattered, doors chained with rust. The officers break through, and the Duprees follow, hearts pounding. What they find is the culmination of every nightmare: Chelsea shackled, pale and trembling, and the masked captor standing over her, knife poised as though waiting for this exact moment. The standoff is electric. The kidnapper taunts them, declaring that Chelsea was never the true prize. Breaking the family was his goal all along, turning their trust into suspicion, their love into agony. The mention of Allison surfaces again, but now as part of his manipulation. He admits to exploiting her obsession, to feeding it, to using her as a smokescreen while he orchestrated something grander. Allison had been dangerous, yes, but she was never capable of this scale alone. As tension peaks, Chelsea seizes her chance. With the captor's attention fixed on the armed officers, she yanks her chain with all her remaining strength, snapping the weakened frame of the bed. The sudden movement startles him, his knife hand wavering. That moment is all it takes. The police surge forward, disarming and subduing him in a blur of violence. Chelsea collapses into Anita's arms, her body trembling with exhaustion, but she is alive. The aftermath is no simple relief. The Duprees learn how meticulously they were studied, how their fears were catalogued and weaponized. Anita confronts the guilt of having suspected Allison so strongly, realizing that while Allison's obsession was real, she too had been manipulated, her instability exploited by someone far colder and more calculating. The lines between villain and pawn blur in disturbing ways. Chelsea struggles with recovery, her body healing faster than her mind. Nightmares stalk her, replaying the room, the mask, the blade. Yet she also finds an ember of strength in survival, a defiance that was not broken even when everything was stripped from her. She knows she will carry scars, but she also knows she was not destroyed. The Dupree family, once fractured by suspicion and fear, begins to knit itself back together. Anita insists that silence will no longer rule. Themed hat secrets must be faced, that the family will no longer hide from its past. For the first time in weeks, the house that once felt haunted by absence fills again with light, tentative but real. The final image belongs to Chelsea. Standing at her window, she looks beyond the gates of her home, out into a world that suddenly feels both dangerous and fragile. She knows shadows will always exist, that the mask may have been removed but the memory of it will linger. Yet she also feels a quiet certainty: survival is not just about living through terror, but about refusing to let terror define what comes next. And so the story closes not with the erasure of fear, but with the resilience to live despite it. The gates remain, symbolic and looming, but this time Chelsea knows she can walk beyond them not as a prisoner, but as someone who has endured, fought, and reclaimed her voice.